Good evening, everybody. I'm Rob Greenwood, Executive Director of the Harris Center at Memorial University, and delighted to be here on Fogo Island for a Memorial Presents on social enterprise for community economic development. And everybody in the room here with us in Joe Bat's arm is very committed to, and I think everybody on the island and throughout Newfoundland and Labrador is committed to how rural communities are searching for innovative ways to sustain their livelihoods, ecosystems, and heritage. And indeed, people around rural Canada and around the world, same thing. And we're lucky that we have a research team here this evening from Memorial who are working closely in partnership with the Shorefast Foundation on Fogo Island, studying social enterprise here on Fogo Island and looking at lessons that can be derived that may apply more broadly to other communities. We'll have a workshop on all this tomorrow, in fact, and we'll talk a bit more about that as the evening goes on. Really pleased to have this session webcast, and welcome to those of you viewing on the web. And you will be able to email in questions, I think. Is that right, Boyan? Boyan is frowning, so we'll let you know as the evening goes on. I am going to introduce our panel, which is led by Dr. Natalie Slawinski, who is Associate Professor of Strategic Management at Memorial University. Natalie is Associate Professor, as I say, Strategic Management. She is a Principal Investigator of a SSHRC, Social Sciences, Humanities and Research Council of Canada, funded research project on social enterprise and community resilience on Fogo Island. And this session is going to dig into that project in a big way this evening. Also on the panel, next to me, Dr. Blair Windsor, who's an assistant professor of entrepreneurship at Memorial University. And he is co-investigator with Natalie of this project. And his research interests are on entrepreneurship and its development in this province. And finally on our panel is Diane Hodgins, CFO, Chief Financial Officer for Shorefast. The mission of Shorefast is to build economic and cultural resilience for Fogo Island. Diane uses modern business practices to serve communities. She acts as a numeric linguist. We may get her to explain that in greater detail as we go along. A translator for the complex and often ambiguous financial language of commerce. Diane creates modern tools such as the Shorefast Economic Nutrition Label. And we'll learn more about that hopefully as the evening goes on. To showcase Shorefast philosophies of right pricing, local sourcing, and community ownership. She is passionate about sharing the merits of the Fogo Island project, an alternative business model where social and economic values are achieved in tandem. And this session tonight will be a great opportunity to do that sharing. And I'm going to dive right into the questions. First of all, we have, for Natalie as the PI, we'll pick on Natalie a lot tonight. That's what happens when you're a principal investigator. How did all this happen? What's the inspiration for this project?
Okay, so to get at that, we have to go all the way back to about 2010 when I first started my position at Memorial. And I was doing research at that time on corporations and how they relate to social and environmental issues. And I started to become a little disillusioned through that research. I realized that large corporations have a lot of structural barriers to being able to engage in a meaningful way and contribute to society. And around that time, I started to pay attention to social enterprise as a different way of organizing. Of course, social enterprises, as many of you know, are organizations that have a social mission and they use business tools to achieve those social missions. And around that time, I also learned of Shorefast here on Fogo Island, and I became really, really intrigued by what was happening here. It felt very different. It felt very counterintuitive. It was the goal here, of course, was to reverse the relationship that oftentimes, society is serving business, and along comes Shorefast, and they start talking about how business needs to serve society. And that captured my imagination in ways that I can't fully explain. But I needed to get at the bottom of this. I wanted to follow what is this model? What is Shorefast trying to build here? And and the aspirations here were so large. It was so intriguing. And so that was the genesis, and around that time, people were saying, you need to go to Fogo Island. You need to see what's going on there. And I think, just when a lot of people come to you and say, you need to go to Fogo Island, you need to see what's going on, you kind of eventually you just feel like you need to go. And so I came.
And so here you are.
And so here I am.
Between then and now, how did this beast evolve as a partnership project?
It all started. It started with a couple of case studies that I asked Zita and her brother Tony Cobb if I could write some case studies. I was so interested in what was going on here that I thought, students need to know what's going on. So there was no big grand plan that this needs to be a research project. It evolved very, very slowly over time. So in about 2012, myself and an MBA student wrote a couple of case studies that we still teach in business schools. And then after that, I asked if I could start doing some research here. So I came in 2014. I spent a couple of months living on Fogo Island, doing a deep dive into the Shorefast Foundation. And then fast forward 2 years after that, we got this big, this SSHRC funding. We built a big team. Blair came on board, Diane came on board. The other research partners are Mark Stoddard, who's here in the audience, Wendy Smith, who couldn't be here because her flight didn't get in from Philadelphia. She's a paradox scholar. John Scouten, who's a Canada Research Chair in Social Enterprise, is here. He's also part of the research team. And then once we got this SSHRC funding, then we brought on a research assistant who became really critical to this whole project, Jennifer Smith, who's also in the room here with her baby, Alice. And so Jennifer spent a lot of time on Fogo Island, about 6 months in total, doing some ethnography work here. And Jennifer now lives on Fogo Island. And that's sort of how it all unfolded, very slowly, but and it built up over time, and it became bigger and bigger. And at this point now, we've collected over 100 interviews with Shorefast Foundation members and with the community, and we've done a lot of. There's just been a ton of research done and data collected over about a 7-year period.
Super. So this funny social enterprise word, Blair, you apparently, by various accounts, study entrepreneurship, and most of us pretend to think we know what entrepreneurship means. How does a focus on social enterprise inform this? What's different?
Well, there's a lot of things that are the same in the entrepreneurial world, whether it's social enterprise or entrepreneurship. You still have to have the people with the ideas. You still have to have some money or resources of one kind or another. The differences, I think, are probably more interesting, particularly for this audience. And I'll just pick on maybe 3 big differences. If you look at the stereotypical Silicon Valley startup, they tend to be technology based. They tend to be scalable along one axis, which is make the enterprise bigger, employ more people, make millions of dollars. And part of that stereotype from Silicon Valley is the idea of creative destruction. So their business models are designed around surpassing or in fact destroying a pre-existing business model. So if you think of Uber and the normal taxi business, or you think of Airbnb and the hotel business, if you look at social enterprise along those 3 lines, well, social enterprise may not be scalable in the same way. The idea of social enterprise may be quite scalable across rural communities, for example, in Newfoundland, but they're not necessarily looking at the bottom line or to employ millions of people or thousands of people and take over the world in that way. If you look at the technology-driven nature of a Silicon Valley versus a social enterprise, they're often not. Technology may be an enabler, but it isn't what's usually driving them. And the creative destruction is largely absent. So most of them will be more interested in actually working with community, environment, being sustainable. So while they're very creative or innovative in some of their business models, like Shorefast. It's not there to destroy other business models.
So Diane, you're on the ground working with Shorefast here on Fogo Island. Based on what we've heard there so far, what are some of the key resources needed to foster social enterprise for community development on Fogo Island?
So just as my background is I'm a chartered accountant. So I came out of a very tight box of rules and regulations. So I have to admit, when I came to this project, there was a tremendous amount of learning that I had to undertake. I had to rewire my brain around the typical business approach of, focus on the bottom line, maximize the rate of return, figure out how you can measure everything, scale, grow as quickly as possible. So first of all, for those of us coming out of that core business world, when you come into social enterprise, you have to change your mindset. And Zita mentioned this earlier. She was speaking today. You have to take a whole thinking approach. So we talk about this cauliflower thinking, about recognizing each community is its own floret in a larger whole. And so when you take an action in a business, it's not just around what's going to happen in that business. When you're looking at social business and community development, you recognize that every action you take in your business affects this nucleus, but it has a much broader ripple effect out into the community and out into the world. So I'd say the first mindset that we have to get into from the typical business is, instead of focusing inward only, you have to focus outward. And I think that's one of the great advantages that we see in working in smaller places, is that you can feel the ripple effect of decisions that you make. So there's been certain things that we've done here on Fogo Island that, if people aren't particularly pleased with it, they come up to the grocery store when I'm shopping here, and they are very open. And so there's an open dialogue. So that feedback loop comes very quickly. So I'd say number one is sort of recognizing that the business, economic or business activity, is just part of a broader community that you are embedded in. So you are a player, but you are not the lone player, and recognizing everything has this spillover effect. The other key resource that was here, that what enabled things here on Fogo Island, is a partnership with recognizing other partners, the federal government, the provincial government, and the university as well. So a lot of the initiatives Shorefast has led, but definitely it's been in the context of engaging the community and other partners from away, making sure that people are kept informed, you learn from one another, different ideas are created. So you can't do it all alone, and sort of recognizing that you have to bring other players that have experience in right from the beginning is another critical element to starting off a project like this. A business in service of community, people don't really understand what that is. I definitely didn't understand when I first came as well. So one of the things that we've done very differently here is really a local focus. So whenever we're looking to purchase something, our buying pattern is, if we can buy it on Fogo Island, we buy it on Fogo Island. If we can't buy it here, then we go to Gander. If we can't get it in Gander, we go to other parts of the province, then we move our way across the country, North America, and around the world. And in no case do we buy anything from places that don't abide by basic environmental and labor standards. And we think that's just part of the practice of recognizing everything that we buy comes from a place that has purpose in what we are buying, and we're buying with intent. And we've seen a great spillover effect for that. I can continue on. The other thing that's really critical is you have to have a mass of people that really are interested in making sure that this, whatever you're here to preserve, that you're willing to fight for it. And you have to have people that are interested in telling the story. If you want to engage with others, you want to get people excited about what you're doing, you have to be able to transfer some of that energy. And I think that's also what's really unique about Newfoundlanders, is there's such a warm hospitality just here. And people have this way of sharing a story, sharing an idea, and that transferring of energy to get people excited about something. That's something that's needed. So you need a group of people that are willing to be part of that energy and be part of engaging others to see what you see in your community, and be willing to be part of that group that's going to fight for that.
Great. Blair or Natalie, anything you'd want to add to anything we've heard there? Nope. Good. So Natalie, back to you. You don't escape just because you didn't answer that. we hear a lot, I hear a lot, Fogo and the Shorefast experience are amazing and fascinating, but not every community has a Shorefast foundation. Not every community has a Zeta Cobb, and Zeta's here tonight somewhere. So the question would be, how unique is the Fogo Island experience with Shorefast? Or are there key lessons from your work that other communities could learn from and apply in their own context?
I'm going to start with the generalizable. I think we are going to share here on Fogo Island 2 days together, and the participants of the workshop are going to learn what is unique about Fogo Island and probably already have an idea of that. And of course, Diane already spoke about what is unique about Shorefast, and we'll be having that conversation. And I know Blair has something to say about that as well. But I want to start with what's generalizable, what can be shared out. The irony about deriving lessons from research is that it can become reductionist. You can end up with a list of, here are the 10 things that you need to do if you want to use social enterprise in community economic development. And so what I thought I would do, because I knew you would ask me about learnings and lessons from this research, is I thought I would sort of distill it down to 4 maybe key learnings, but they're all so deeply interrelated with each other that it's even hard to separate them. But I'm going to try. So, and this is not surprising, but obviously, if you're going to do this kind of work of, if you're, and we have community leaders in this room who all care about their communities, that the first learning is knowing how to honor place. And honoring place requires seeing the value in your place and understanding that to see the value in your place, sometimes you need to understand, you need outsiders to come in and help you see what is valuable about your place. And community champions have a really big role to play in honoring, not only honoring place, but also mediating the relationship between insiders and outsiders in a community. Because when outsiders come in, they bring skills, they bring resources, and they help you see your place in unique ways that you may not have in which you may not have seen it. However, the local residents bring so much value because they hold the local knowledge, and it's important to have people in a community who can recognize the value of both local knowledge and outside knowledge and understand how to bring insiders and outsiders together for meaningful exchange and respectful dialogue. And so to me, when I think about community champions, I think about people who not only honor place, but can also help people understand the value of their place and can harness the energy of insiders and outsiders and can manage those tensions between them. And so the second learning would be understanding how to bring insiders and outsiders together for respectful, meaningful exchange. And then the third learning, and that's directly related to that, is understanding how to manage the tensions that come out of the work that community champions do. And community development, as you all know, is rife with tensions. And so understanding how to manage those tensions is critical. And so one of the learnings from our research here on Fogo Island and watching the Shorefast Foundation or Shorefast over the past number of years has been how they take a both and approach, what we would call in academia, a paradoxical approach, understanding that things can be contradictory, but if you can also see the interrelatedness of these contradictory elements, then you can really harness the energy from that and the possibilities from that. And so understanding the both and knowing how to harness that is sort of a third learning that comes out of that. And then the last one is the power of language and narratives for making change. There's a story on Fogo Island about resilience in the face of adversity. And that story comes out of a history here with the Fogo process, where this community survived as a result of, in the face of a lot of adversity. And we saw, Shorefast sort of pick up on that narrative and introduce it back in. So the narrative already existed, but it's which narratives do you give prominence to? and which ones do you kind of challenge? Because if you think about rural Newfoundland as a depleted place, then you'll start to believe that and you'll act on it and you'll lose hope and you'll leave rural Newfoundland if you really believe that it offers no future. If, however, you have a different sort of story about rural Newfoundland, that's what's going to shape, if you have a mind, if you can shape attitudes and mindsets to be more hopeful and provide a story that's more compelling and positive, this is what people are going to gather around those stories, and they will enact them. They will make them happen. They become, in other words, stories become self-fulfilling prophecies. And so we have to think carefully about which stories we want to tell. And you in the room are all community champions who care about your places. And so the fourth learning would be, think really carefully about the language that you use and the stories that you tell people, because those can become self-fulfilling.
Well, it'll be interesting when we open up to the Q&A with the people here from all over Labrador and the island, how they see some of those lessons applying in their context maybe. And people will be able to email in questions and comments. But before we do that, Blair, so that's some of the key lessons that are generalizable, applicable to elsewhere. So is there anything unique about Fogo then?
I'm not sure, other than the fact that I'm a Newfoundlander, that you're asking me that, but I'm not from Fogo Island, and I'm very conscious of university folk coming in and saying, I'm here to solve all your problems and know the answers. I think there are two parts to that question. What's unique about Shorefast, and then what's unique about Fogo Island? I'm not sure which part of that you're asking, or you're going to say both, aren't you?
Absolutely. I think you should start with Shorefast and then we'll move to Fogo.
I suspect and I'm conscious that Zita and Alan somewhere in the, so what may be some of the unique aspects of Shorefast is that Zita Cobb came back with a lot of money and also a vision, or a developing vision. But those kind of resources attract other resources. But and this is sort of tipping over now into what's special about Fogo Island, she also came back having been steeped in the mythology is the wrong word, but in the narrative, in the story of the Fogo Island process. And what's probably unique about Fogo Island is that process. The cooperative is arguably quite unique also. There's not many fishing cooperatives in Newfoundland, and it's certainly one of the oldest, I think. So that legacy of the island coming together to discuss its future and fight for its future is not necessarily a narrative that's shared throughout Newfoundland and other communities. I think the other thing that's unique about Fogo Island that probably drives some of those other things is it's still an island, and it feels that. I suspect Fogo Islanders feel that. So if they are distinct and separate, and there's an hour on the ferry or 45 minutes, that probably are some of the things that make Fogo Island unique.
So Diane, that's some of what these university types are saying and their research they've learned. And you were brave enough, Shorefast, to partner with them on this.
Yeah.
So what are some of the learnings from the research that you find most interesting and helpful? And why do you think that?
Yeah, I wanted to make the point too, what's been very unique to this is a partnership grant, where it's a partnership between Shorefast and Memorial, is the amount of time that the research team has spent actually living in the community of Fogo Island. So this wasn't the research team dropping in for a day here and there, running a workshop and leaving. Natalie has spent, I think, probably in total up to 6 months living here with her family and on her own, embedding herself in the community. Jennifer was here over the course of 1.5 years, almost 2 years, for months at a time. And I think it's only when you come with that critical eye for the long term or for an extended amount of term where you embed yourself into the community that you really start to feel the lessons. It's one thing to just come in and do some interviews, but it takes a long time to build trust. And that comes with, excuse me, with time. So I'm from away. I'm a come from away. I'm 6 years into coming to back and forth with Fogo Island, and I work, diligently in this. But it has taken time for people to also trust me because I'm coming from a different background and from a different place. So just I wanted to make sure that point was very clear that this partnership grant has come together over the last couple of years, but it has been a long-term investment and time in the community that I think a lot of the lessons sort of burbled up, because the interviews that were done and the lessons that came out came from the research team's relationships with certain people in the community. People had seen them in the community and were willing to talk to them, or were more comfortable willing to offer their opinion because they trusted that they were being heard and that what they were going to say was going to be valued and kept confidential. So I just wanted to stress that point. Like I said, I've been working on the project for 6 years in-house. And in this research, I think one of the great things that it forced me to do was to slow down for a minute. We move very quickly with a lot of projects and lots of things underway. So in working in, this was the first time I'd ever worked in this sort of research process, but it forces you to stop and talk through your lessons. So it forces you to take stock of what you know. And until someone has you slow down and actually vocalize or write it down, you don't tend to maybe catalog what you learn. So that was really a positive experience for us at Shorefast because it forced us to not, like I said, the 10 easy steps for social enterprise, that doesn't exist. So I hope you're not hoping for that answer. But it did force us to document some things and to sort of put a bit more rigor around some of our learnings, so such that they are easily translatable. So the reflection process was hugely valuable for myself. And then I was able to share this with people here today. And we took some of those lessons and have embedded them into the businesses and the activities. One of the key learnings for myself is a big part of my role is helping foster more business on the island. So we have a lot of conversation through our business assistance fund. How do we get more new business startup? How do we get more engagement? What are the resources that are available? And the space that we're actually sitting in tonight, we had the intention initially of becoming a business incubation center. And so we had looked at various different models, the hub model that has worked in sort of urban centers. And once we got into the research, and a big part of what I was involved in, Alvin Sims, did some economic modeling. So I worked with Alvin and contributed some Shorefast data and worked along with him analyzing a lot of data. And there's only 25% of the island's population do not have a standard place of work. That's a pretty high percentage when you compare it with the rest of the province in Canada. So the orientation of work is not, for a long history, it was not to come to a place where I sit down and I work here at these hours with these resources. So here we had spent a lot of time trying to organize what resources do we need to do to gather everybody together to work. Once we got into, Jennifer was doing a lot of conversation, people were just saying, I don't really, that's not how I want to gather to idea. I'd like some resources available, but I don't feel the need to come and sit in the room with other people to get that energy. That works very well in urban centers. I've worked in those environments. So the culture of work and forcing us to sort of think through some of that, how that burbled up in the research was really valuable. So understanding, the history with how people, are they self-employed? Have they always been employed? Has there been a major employer in the community? What kind of assets, are they natural resource businesses? So looking at the culture of work and people's relationship with business, there's some really interesting findings that came into this research that have been helpful for us to then foster new development. The other thing that came out of the economic data is what a significant impact what we have had on the island's economy in terms of its GDP. So the most recent data is the 2016 census. And at that time, Shorefast projects, the Inn has only been open 3 years at that point. We were about 18% of the island's GDP. That's 3 years into what has been started. So Blair mentioned there was a huge investment of capital that came in initially, or it seemed so huge at the time, but the economic spinoff that has come from that investment of capital has been enormous. And we only have 3 years of measured data. So I'm very anxious to get, the next census, and we can start to see that momentum. So although it sounds like a huge investment up front, what this project is proving is you build the economic capital, you build the physical resources in the community, build businesses around it, the spinoff can be tremendous. The other thing that was really interesting to see is on Fogo Island, only 20%, half of the population is actively working. So we have a 50-50 split on Fogo Island of people that are actively working, and only 20% of the active working population on Fogo Island works full-time. So we have had in the projects and the way that we've oriented the projects in locally sourcing wherever we can. So trying to have as much of an economic spinoff in other businesses as best we can, trying to hire local at whatever, in whatever case we can, help support the ecosystem of new business development here. We're still, it's only 20% of a full-time working population. So there's a huge, I'm very excited about this because I think the narrative has been aging population, loss of workforce. That doesn't need to be the story. The data is showing us you can have a smaller percentage of your workforce actively working and actively engaged and have a huge impact on the economy. The key is understanding the levers in that. So it's not necessarily mass volume, which I think a lot of businesses have been moving out as much volume as possible. We have taken a different approach. It's a higher dollar value, high quality, making sure that what comes from here is of the place, is specific to Fogo Island, and you can only get that level of service, that quality of product, that specific touch point you can only get here. And so then you can bring it at an economic price that serves the community and is representative of all of the parts that go into that. So you're not undercutting, you're carrying true pricing that reflects all of the energy that goes into it. So high quality at a better price. And then it's not a story of loss. It's a story of we have only started to tap into all the potential that's here. And there's so much left. So this was a real eye-opening for myself, as well as when I was talking with Alvin, because there has been that story of population decline. But the reality is you don't need your entire population engaged in economic activity. You need the few critical levers that are working in your favor at the right price point and in the right markets that are having people interested to come and invest in your community.
So this is someone with an accounting background saying there are actual practical contributions from research.
Yes.
Everybody write it down. So beyond that, Diane, for Fogo, some of those learnings really are powerful. So when you talk to communities elsewhere, and in this particular case, we have a room full of people from around the island and Labrador, people viewing online, and this will be on the Harris Center website. What kind of encouragement would you provide to those communities and their leaders and residents who are interested in taking up social enterprise for community development? Where do these communities start?
So I'd say the first place to start is really you need to become your own detective of your community. So the concept of asset-based community development, this understanding of what is already there in your community. And the questions that are asked at the beginning phase of this is, what do we know? What do we love? What do we miss? What are we willing to fight for? And once you get a sense of looking at from the what we have versus what we don't have, then there's a natural energy around that, and people start to find a bit of pride in it and think, oh, these are all the things. If I could find employment in this, and if I could build an energy around it, I'd be really excited, and I could get everybody engaged, and I could get everybody on board. So I'd say that's step one. So you have to look from within and find what is unique in your community that everybody that is part of this process wants to be a part of. Because if you are spending all your time trying to convince everybody to come on board, and there will always be naysayers, but you have to show what is already embedded there that people hold so deeply that they're willing to go for the long haul for it. I'd say also early, you need to sort of find your tribe. It's difficult work. Natalie mentioned sort of this tension. It's change. You know, economic development means you're moving into a new phase. That means you're going to have to shed some of your old ways. Not everything the way it was is going to be. You're going to have to get uncomfortable. Your routines are going to be, you know, moving a little bit. So there's a natural tension in that. As an accountant, I like everything in my spreadsheets and my columns and rows. I would love to give you all the 10 easy steps. And when I came to this project, that's exactly what I intended to do right off the front. That is not possible. It doesn't exist because every community is unique. So if you try to boil this down to the 10 easy steps, and it's something we've struggled with in this project greatly, how do you translate out what we're doing without making it into steps or key lessons or key ideas? So I think what we've tried to do is give you some of sort of the fence posts and the broad learnings of things that we started with. And then you can take some of those lessons and then make them very specific to your own situation. So find others that are willing to be part of that conversation. I'd also say that it is really hard work to think whole. You know, this idea of whole thinking and looking at it from every perspective, you know, it is a lovely, you know, it's lovely. It rolls off the tongue very nicely. In reality, I can tell you, it's sometimes very difficult because you are having two competing, you know, demands for things. So you have a lot of difficult discussions. So what tends to happen is we don't like the tension. I got to make a decision. Let's move on, move on. So you go one way or the other. When you go one way or other, you've left something out. And when we make really fast decisions in this project, now sort of the hair stands up on the back of my neck. And I'm like, we left somebody out. I forgot somebody. That went too easy. That went too quick. So my caution would be things move. In the business world, I'm always trying to get everything wrapped up, move on to the next project. Things do not move as quickly as you might like. And that's sort of the last lesson is I want to talk about collaboration. So you have to stay in the game, stay in the conversation. A lot of the time when you're collaborating, you're creating something new, you're looking at this whole thinking of competing, whether it's competing for personnel or dollar resources or picking which project to start with or what to lead with. Who gets left out. Don't rush it and stay in the conversation as long as you can. Because although you may not come to a conclusion right away, staying in conversation with people brings new insight. It keeps people in the game. There are things that will be learned, although it may be in discord. They still heard what you said. I still see you. And as long as we're all committed to staying at the table, there is value in that. And I think rural places, small places, that's already deeply embedded there. You know, specific to Fogo Island, it is an island off the island. People here knew, you know, we fight to stay here long ago, or we all go. We have a shared common fate. We don't have another option. So what are we going to do? We have to rally together and find a solution. It's sometimes, you know, I think small places that need to hold on. It's in some ways, it's more tangible of how you can see if one person walks away from the table, you see them. I think in larger centers, you don't feel it as much because it's not everybody that you know that lives down the street or you'll see at the school the next day. But I would just say that art of collaboration is just staying in the game and seeking to find some sort of solution, some path. It's not going to be a direct line. And I think we're all looking for the direct line. It won't happen that way. You have to know what direction you're roughly going, but it won't be a straight path, and that's okay. It's hard work, it's frustrating, but it's also the most rewarding work that you'll ever do.
So lots of good lessons there for other communities and some inspiration, I think. So for all of you then, because we've been talking about the content of the work and some pretty good stuff coming out of it, what about the actual doing of the work and the fact that this has been done as a partnership between Memorial University researchers and Shorefast Foundation and Fogo residents? What are some of the benefits of that kind of partnership? Who'd like to go first on that?
I can
Natalie.
go first. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think for us as a research team, having built up trust over time and having partnered very deeply with Shorefast meant that we had extremely good access to this organization, and we can't thank Shorefast enough for that, because as researchers, one of the toughest things to do is to gain access into an organization? What organization wants to open itself up and let you see everything, including their dirty laundry? I mean, I've had in my past research life, doing research in large corporations, I've had a lot of doors slammed on me, and people didn't want to tell me things. People worry about, or companies, organizations worry about IP, and they worry about confidentiality and all of that. And so Shorefast gave us extraordinarily good access. And so that has been really very beneficial to us, because we have extremely rich data from which we can work as academics. So I would say that's a huge benefit to us, is that trust and the kind of access that we got to do the work that we are doing. That benefits not only our publications when we get this out to journals, because that's the currency we work with as academics, is peer-reviewed publications. But it means that we can now disseminate to communities richer insights for them. And so I think the benefits are not just to us as researchers, the benefits are to community members. And hopefully this will all sort of unfold tomorrow when we have the workshop, and we can sort of go more deeply into those learnings.
Blair, anything you'd want to add on the benefits of a research partnership like this?
I'll add one thing, and it's riffing slightly over what we heard earlier tonight. And one of the benefits that both parties get is ideas. The community gets exposure to our ideas, and we get exposure to their ideas, which is also what we're in the currency of the academic world. We're all about ideas. We're interested in ideas. And so that's extremely valuable to us. But I'd like to think that the ideas that we might be able to suggest or to expose Shorefast or other organizations to is also valuable to them.
Diane, anything you'd want to add on the benefits of this kind of research
so
partnership?
I think I alluded to it before. So one, it forces us to sort of slow down for a minute and take stock of what we do know and how we would try to translate that out, because that has been helpful in us. And we've been very focused on Fogo Island, and a lot of projects underway here. But a big part of what we want to do is sort of reach out into the broader community. So these type of projects give you sort of a timeline and a deadline to stop and focus and think about, well, how would I translate this out? How do I engage with others? How do I open this up to a broader learning, not just what's on here? So it's nice to have sort of a team in sort of that discussion. The other thing it does is it's strengthening our relationship with the university. So we are lucky to have a university not too far from here. And I personally am very driven to reorient our way forward with business and figure out how to use business as a tool in service of community. How do we better? I'm very passionate about building new economic models, about new, we talked about the economic nutrition label, about how to build new tools that clearly demonstrate where does the money from your business come from? Where does the money go? How are you impacting your community? A lot of what financial transactions right now are very black. You buy a product, you buy a service, you used to pay an individual. Now, a lot of the time you pay online. There is no really foresight as to what happens with that money after it's gone. I'm very interested in that. And I think the education system around our business mindset and our orientation, it's going to be people that come out of an interest in economic systems and economic theory that are going to help us find this way forward. So I think the university partners are critical for this, because this is going to be a new way of thinking about how we measure. We are in how do we properly value things? And I think we've had such a strong lead with looking at businesses measuring only financial value. And right now, a lot of the universities, and there's a lot of research into, well, how do you measure environmental impact? How do you measure social impact? And measurement seems to be the key driver. I think we like numbers, we like measurement because it's something we can hold to. But I think there's a whole new thought process that has to come in. You mentioned about this concept of a numeric linguist. I really see accounting, it's another language. It's a language of business. I can tell a story with a spreadsheet or a financial statement. That's very different if I move some of the numbers around, or if I highlight certain things, or I focus on cash and less on profit. It's a language. And so you're telling a story with numbers, and we can use numeric models to shift the way that we see our economic footprint and the way that we buy things and the way that we orient ourselves with money. I think we're just at the cusp of what all this possibility can be. So I think I'm very excited to engage a whole new group of accountants and finance people and economists that want to start thinking through this new orientation with money and how we develop business communication tools to foster that. Because I think a lot of it is around the narrative you tell. If what you see on the page is the only story you see, that's the only option you have. If we start having other ways of communicating out, make it very clear where the money goes, how you're investing in your community, I think that will change the narrative, and I think it'll change the outcome of how communities build businesses that are in service of the local.
So I'd like to add something to what Diane said, is that there's a huge benefit here to our students. And so at Memorial University, Blair and I teach in a business school, and we are able to take the learnings that we've derived and the research we've done here on Fogo Island with Shorefast. We're able to show our students that there are other ways to do business. There are other business models. There are other ways, there are other mindsets that we can adopt, and that really business has to change. That a lot of our business models are broken, and there has to be another way, because the planet really is, suffering, and there are so many big social and environmental problems in the world, and that business students can feel empowered and be part of the solution if they want to. And so we have to show them how that can happen. And I think the other I was thinking about other benefits of this collaboration. We as a business school at Memorial have benefited from this partnership with Shorefast because it gave us the inspiration that we needed to start a new program. We're starting an MBA in social enterprise and entrepreneurship next September. That wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for this partnership with Shorefast. I don't think it would have. We started a Center for Social Enterprise that was inspired by the Shorefast, folks. And so we have benefited incredibly from this partnership. And I'm sure there are other ways in which we've benefited, and I just can't think of them right now, but the spinoffs have been tremendous.
Let's stop being so positive. There's clearly lots of good stuff. Every partnership has its challenges. And so in the case of this partnership, other than the challenge for both of you having to work with Blair, we go back too far. Now, what are some of the challenges of this kind of research partnership? Who'd like to weigh into that first?
I could take a stab at one thing that's is the ethical issues around how you have access to a lot of the information about the organization, and you've also done interviews with many of the people in a small community who know each other, and you're in a partnership with Shorefast, and Diane is on your team, and you have to manage the confidentiality of people, and you also have to manage your integrity as an academic in terms of what you will and won't say about your project and the learnings from it, or whatever. And that's I think it's a crucial thing that we've spent a lot of time working on and making sure that it was satisfactory to everyone. But there had to be probably on Diane's and Shorefast's a huge amount of trust in what we were going to do and around our integrity and the ethics involved in this.
Yeah.
Great. Other challenges you'd want to highlight, Natalie or Diane?
I think a challenge I think for research in general is it's been mentioned is you need access to people within the organization in order to have context of you need access to the information to actually do the research. So I think a challenge it's probably more so for them than for us, but is just finding the time. Like you have to actually invest time to think and have those critical conversations. So for us, we're always very busy, and I have lots of things on the go. So at times I felt the research team was very persistent and consistent with, we're coming here, we need to see the team, here's the timelines. It would be very easy to say, oh, whatever, they'll get what they need when they're on the ground. But the reality is, as busy as we were, and as our whole team is here with Shorefast, so some of the constraints would be a timeline that was was very busy for us on the island in the summer. But there was a reason for the research team to get an answer at that time. It's very easy to dismiss it when you have such a focus of what you're doing yourselves. So I'd say that was definitely a challenge, because it is over and above sort of what your day-to-day work is and your internal commitments, to making sure that you're committed to being available and slowing down and providing enough depth for the research team to actually have something to discuss. So getting access to people was a challenge, and we knew that we were critical in making sure that happened. And so some parts of the project, we had set timelines of when things were going to happen. We had to move around different phases of the research because, for whatever reason, I was too busy, or it was, certain times just didn't work. So I'd say that was a challenge in some ways, having access and making sure that we slowed down enough to provide the information needed.
Natalie, anything you'd add?
Yeah, and this is typical of any kind of researcher, community, or organization relationship, is that researchers have very long time horizons. Organizations have much shorter time horizons. And so, it may take 5 years to publish a rigorous study of an organization, and the organization may want to see the results of your research within months. And so managing that is really critical. And so one of the things that we did as a team, and this is very consciously, we made this decision that we were going to flip the order of things. And so with this research grant and this research project, normally how it would unfold is you do your research, you publish in journals, and then as an afterthought, you pull out the learnings and then you share them with the organization. And that could be a 5-year time horizon. We made the conscious decision that actually we were going to flip the order and start with dissemination. Let's take the learnings out of the data and share them out, which is why we're all here on Fogo Island for this workshop. And then we will do the publishing later, because publishing in a journal could take 2-3 years. And so what organization wants to wait for that? And I know this wasn't your question, but there is another learning from all of this that I think could apply to community leaders who are here, is that if you are going to engage with academic researchers, then be mindful of your goals, your expectations, and make sure that you're getting value out of it for yourself. Researchers, of course, we come in and we have our own goals for the research, and we are looking to publish in journals, and that's all well and good, and it's important to contribute to knowledge. But when you partner with researchers, you have an opportunity to also get benefits out of it, but you need to sort of have an understanding of what it is you want to get out of the research, and you should negotiate that with researchers. And so you have an opportunity to have more agency in this process than maybe you think, or you can if you want.
No, absolutely. Memorial is the only university in Canada, in fact, with a public engagement framework that's approved by Senate. So it's not a nice to do, it's a governing document of the university. And a core principle of it is mutual benefit. And so what Natalie says there is right on. So in terms of benefits for community development in Newfoundland and Labrador, rural development, economic development, any final thoughts before we open it up to the floor for lots of questions or suggestions or debate here that any of you would like to add?
I think just to put in a plug for the workshop tomorrow, I think one of the things that we're hoping is going to come out of tomorrow's workshop is that very question, because this research and the learnings we're talking about this evening, this is just a starting point for a conversation. We didn't bring you all to Fogo Island to share with you what we learned here on Fogo Island, or just to share with you what we learned on Fogo Island. We brought you all here to Fogo Island so that we can learn from you, all of you, what you are doing in your communities, and more importantly, so that you will talk to each other and learn from each other. because I think there is a tendency, and this happens a lot in all realms of life. You know, in at the university, we all have our silos. We work in our silos. I think in Newfoundland, my sense is that you're all part of a community or a region where you may know what each other are doing, but you may not know, if you're on the Bonavista Peninsula, you may not know what's going on the West Coast. If you're in St. John's, you may not know what's going on in Labrador. And so this is an opportunity for community leaders from all over Newfoundland to get together and actually learn what each other are doing in your regions, and then share learnings, and hopefully we can then continue this conversation into the future. So we're hoping this is just a starting point.
Super. Well, I think we will open it up to the crowd here in the room and on the web. If you want to email in a question, you can by emailing B first. We all want to be first. In this particular case, it's Boyan first. And so it's BFURST at mun.ca. And if you're in the room, you just have to put up your hand. So you don't have to spell names or anything. And we have a mic here we're going to take away from Blair, because that's a very dangerous thing. And if you put up your hand, we want to make sure we get the mic to you, not so that we can hear you in the room, but so that people viewing on the web can hear you. So who would like to go first here? Put up your hand. There we go. And please introduce yourself and make a comment, but hopefully also have a question. Get some dialogue going here. I need to turn on the mic. And say all that again.
Hi, my name is Emily Bland. I'm the CDO of Succeed. We're a hydroponic social enterprise that came out of an access memorial. There's a lot of discussion across Canada and around the world on what social enterprise is actually defined as. I'd love to hear from each of you guys in one sentence what does social enterprise mean to you.
I love the one sentence requirement. How to make an academic, you know, you say drive a Newfoundlander crazy is play Harry Hibbs and nail his feet to the floor. Tell an academic to say something in one sentence. So we'll start with Natalie, and then we'll go to Diane, because she might be able to do it.
Well, I'm going to put another plug in for the workshop tomorrow. We're going to be talking tomorrow about how social enterprise is really a mindset. It's just a way of thinking about the relationship between business and society, and how business can serve society or community.
That was quite succinct. Diane.
I'd say it's, we say it's business-minded ways in service of community. And so I think what's happened in Canada is we've got very hung up on, are you a for-profit? Are you a nonprofit? Are you a trust? Are you a CIC? Are you a C3? Are you a this? Are you that? Like whatever box you want to create. But really, I think there is, each situation is unique. And so there is a specific legal structure that is best for you. More so for tax planning than on the social enterprise side is how I would advise it, or for grant making or grant recipients as well. But it's really an orientation of using business as a tool. So the profit motive is not, yes, you have to be profitable. You have to be able to make enough money to keep reinvesting, but it's not that for-profit mindset is the goal. And it's, the business is a great way to organize ourselves. It's a great framework. It has a lot of flexibility in it, but it's just all of the decision-making in your day-to-day operations of how you use those business tools that I think encompasses social enterprise. That's how I would try to succinctly put it. If I can.
And I'd just like to say that it's not only academics who are long-winded. Business people can be long-winded too.
I'm glad Natalie pointed that out. Blair, the gauntlet has been thrown down. Your one sentence.
I won't add anything to what my two learned friends have added.
Coward. So we need to get the mic up to Boyan. Oh, the last question was, can you say a definition of social enterprise in one sentence? Yes. So did you have a question emailed in? No? Okay. So in the room, other hands up, please. Up here at the front, please. And again, you can introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. My name is Rowland Wells. I'm originally from Fogo. I've been away for the last 30 years serving with the RCMP in various locations across Canada, and just retired and moved back here. Been involved in a lot of social development projects in my service. There are always unintended consequences to some of the work. Have you found any unintended consequences, and how did you mitigate those?
Great question.
I'd like to start with the unintended consequence that probably a lot of you here, community leaders here, have probably experienced in your own communities. Is this idea, when people come and buy homes and they become summer homes and people spend 2 weeks in them, what you end up with is a hollowing out of community because you have a lot of empty houses. And so in the case of this project, of course, Fogo Island became a very desirable place to live, and not just for people moving back like yourself, but also for people, speculators, people wanting to see if they can buy property and the value of it can then go up. And so what you have also is that the cost of housing goes up and it can become unaffordable for the community. So that's an example of an unintended consequence. Whether this is not something we directly studied, however, it is something that came up in our research. And in terms of your other question, how does that get resolved? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I mean, I think it's a really tangly challenge that not only Fogo Island faces, but other communities that have become desirable places to live. I'm sure, like Port Rexton is another example of that. It's become a very popular place, and it's close to St. John's, so people can buy homes there and maybe spend only a few weeks of the year there, but then it lies empty the rest of the time. So you have both the hollowing out of community and the rise in the price of housing.
Diane, want to?
Yeah, I'd say that's definitely a big one. The other one is just being able to, as we're growing very rapidly, then being able to attract people quick enough to come back. So there is like an aging population, like an older population here. The median age here is in the low 50s. And so the whole generation had gone away from work, went away for school in many cases and gone away. So another sort of consequence is that we're starting to employ those that are the able-bodied people that are interested in coming and being part of what we're doing. So, if they have the skill set now, we're seeing that there's a small pool of available market labor as we continue to grow. So we're, growing 10 to 20% a year. So we need to continue to try to employ as many local people as we can. So there's not as much of a working, we're going to run out at some point. So we're hoping we have to start really being active in bringing some of those skill sets back. So I know, like I'm involved in the accounting and the finance and the legal and HR side. So there hasn't been a huge market for those skill sets here. So a lot of what the conversation is trying to bring, make it clear that opportunity is available here now. And so having a broader message about providing opportunity to come back. So it's a good unintended consequence, but it does, there's a bit of a pressure point because in between having the local market, you're bringing people in. So that migration of new skill set in, that causes, learnings on both sides, but it also is a new orientation. And this is where we do really butt up against housing, is when we're bringing people to come and move back to the island and there's very limited housing available, it becomes a challenge for sure. And access to transport, all that. So we've got the new ferry, but it's busier. So that's a good thing. But for some, it's definitely more of a challenge if you're not actively working and you're used to lower levels of volume. That could be seen as an unintended consequence of just being busier. Now, these are all consequences that are bringing more energy, more employment, more positive spin. But I think it is a lot, and it may be a matter of interpretation as part of the growth and change.
Blair, any unintended?
Just riffing off of what Diane was talking about, there's also the perhaps unintended is that with the inflow of non-Fogo Islanders, many or a number have decided to stay, and sometimes that can engender a tension with the native Fogo Islander who's wondering who these outsiders are and why are they here. So I don't think that was ever intended either. So Fogo Islanders and the newcomers have to sort of engage in perhaps a dance and get to know each other a little bit better, and recognize what each of them brings to the table, or each group brings to the table.
Thank you, Blair and panel. So Boyan has one that's been emailed in.
This is a question from Alex Hickey. He says, great discussion panel. On a very practical level, how does one initiate a community university research partnership with Memorial University?
Blair wants to go first.
Alex, it's a really good question, and probably one that a number of people in this room and outside it want an answer to. Let me start with a couple of blunt statements, perhaps. And one, it's relationship 101. You are creating a relationship, and you've seen in what Diane and Natalie have talked about is some of the elements of that have been the building of trust, which takes time. There also has to be a commitment on both parties to the relationship. And that, of course, those two, trust and commitment, bounce off or are intertwined. There also has to be a long-term perspective. Both Diane and Natalie at the beginning, and now the other members of the research team, we've committed to the long term. The other thing that I think was quite crucial here is that both parties put something on the line. In Shorefast's, for example, Shorefast put their CFO, which is a high-level executive in their organization, and gave a certain amount of her time, Diane's time, to the project. So there was a high-level commitment on Shorefast's part. I can't emphasize enough that those things were crucial from my perspective of how this relationship has evolved. And I also think it's important to say that the relationship, like any relationship, it wasn't all smooth sailing. We have had our arguments and disagreements, but in a very constructive way throughout. So having said that, one of the things that I think might be helpful too is that if you're going to try to do a relationship with a memorial, with an academic, or indeed any relationship, that you start with a small project. So you build the relationship through small projects. You don't decide. We didn't decide when we came to this, and when Natalie came to this, that we were going to be here for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. It started with very, very small case studies, and then it grew into the SHIRK Partnership Development Grant. And it's like most relationships, you want to establish small things first and see if you get along without making the big commitments.
It's like dating
before
before you get married.
I was going to stay away from that bit, particularly given my history, but it is very much like you don't get married date first. Yeah.
Give me that, Mike. He's liking it far too much. Natalie, on this question.
I just said what I wanted to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Diane?
Yeah.
I'd say, just start the conversation.
Yeah.
Start, find a resource within the university that you think shares common values. And if you can start from that point, I think that there's great learning between two. You don't know what's going to come, but I think you have to be on the same values alignment to start the conversation for it to work. But I'd say just go out, try to find that partner, have some conversations, and see who might be a good fit for whatever purpose that you're invested in.
Actually, I do have two things I would say, and that's to add to both Diane and Blair's points, is that, get out there and expose yourself to what academics are doing by maybe going to conferences or workshops or events, or, for example, organized by the Harris Center or organized by the Center for Social Enterprise. These are these are units within Memorial that are designed to bring researchers and community together. So that's a wonderful opportunity. And then the other piece I was going to mention is, and this is sort of Blair's comment about starting small made me think about this, but it's just to basically go and have conversations with people and see if they're willing to, if they're going to bite. And so it's really trial and error. It's having conversations to see if there's that fit. Another way is maybe YAFL. You know, you can get on YAFL and see what academics at Memorial are actually studying to see if you have a particular need. So if you're trying to understand, I don't know, botany in your community, then you can go and find out who at Memorial University is studying a particular, you know, element of botany that you're interested in.
Beautiful answer, Natalie. I'm kind of fond of YAFL myself. Blair, you were going to dive into that again?
I'm gonna, yeah, I was gonna say that the dating app here is YAFL. So that's your one of the best ways to get to start a relationship with a Memorial researcher.
And depending on where you are, and Natalie did mention, you know, the Center for Social Enterprise, of course, the Harris Center, but there's a whole bunch of centers and units across Memorial. There's the Labrador Institute in Labrador. Grenfell campus has the Office of Public Engagement, Grenfell Office of Engagement. And the Marine Institute has locations all around the province, etc. So if you don't know where to turn, YAFL is there, Harris Center is there as a navigator, but there's a bunch that are there to make that first connection. Did you have another question emailed in? Okay, we have one at the back. Oh, one over on this side. Okay. You can introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Carol Penton, and I'm a native Fogo Islander. Get very emotional when anybody goes to do any research about Fogo Island. I was a very big part of the Fogo process, as it is known. God rest his soul, Colin Lowe came years ago and filmed everybody and was so respectful of their communities and their voices. And, you know, no, we all don't have Zetas, and that is really unfortunate. But hopefully this Shorefast connection and can be a learning tool for the whole province. And I look at it on a smaller scale because we're very fortunate in Jobet's Arm that we have the inn and we have so much happening in our community. Yet there are a couple of communities here on Fogo Island, Island Harbour, Deep Bay, Stag Harbor, that are not developing as well, we should say. So hopefully, I'd like to see, as part of the social enterprise, I suppose, more business people, more confidence in wanting to start a business on Fogo Island. What I think is, Diane, you mentioned the 50, you know, the aging population. Unfortunately, people are getting up there now and they're not as inclined to invest in a business. So what we're seeing are people coming from off the island and starting small businesses here. Yes, absolutely, no problem. Like we're tickled pink that this is happening because they are hiring our people. And of course, the Fogo Island Inn has hired, what, close to 100 Fogo Islanders? Really? Okay. So I'd like to see more of an emphasis put on people younger generation starting small businesses on Fogo Island. I'd also, I sing at the Fogo Island Inn, and I'm a publisher, so I know a little bit of the history of Fogo Island. So I see all these cooks and all these chefs that are at the inn, and I'm like, we could have those. So that's something else that I'd like to see, is some of our young people, because Natalie, I believe you mentioned about getting the younger people to be able to come back because of the shortage in the workforce later on in life. And the third thing that I'd like to mention is, I don't remember your name.
Rob.
Rob? I noticed that you said Fogo when you referred to the island. Now, I'm not. All right. I know it's a contentious topic for some people, but it's not for me. I don't care what we're called. But when you say Fogo, you're not saying island. So people that are coming from Norway, Germany, Ethiopia, or wherever, excuse me, when they hear Fogo, they don't know it's an island off the island of Newfoundland. So when this research is done, and I'm sure I speak for many, would appreciate it that it be called Fogo Island process. I'm sure, it was an academic typo back in the day. We can get that creative. These are just some of the things that are personal to me, and I'd like to see it evolve to where everybody is hunky-dory. Thank you.
Thank you. Lots of great comments there. Apologies on my part. You're lucky that I won't be the one writing up any of this. So you're in much better hands. But I'm sure there could be stuff there that any of the panel would like to weigh in on.
I mean, yeah, no. Just for the different community, I mean, one of the things that we've seen too is a key element for business success. We live in a globalized world. We're selling into a global marketplace is internet. So this is an issue not only on Fogo Island, but in rural places across the province. And having access to good internet and a strong bandwidth is critical. And that's something that is an issue here on Fogo Island. Different communities have different bandwidth and different access. So that's something here that's to be a push in the province as a whole. So when you have access to a global marketplace, doesn't matter where you are, it opens up a whole new window. So I think keeping sort of a broadband strategic view for the province high on the page and for keeping rural places, that's also very important. So again, that needs to be kept at top of mind to keep equal access to all.
I would just add that thank you, Carol. Thank you to all Fogo Islanders who welcome academics like us to Fogo Island and open your come down this island. So thank you.
Blair, anything you want to add? Nope. I think I saw a hand, yes, over there.
Hi, my name is Nick Wells. I work with the town of Fogo Island. So actually kind of wanted to build off Carol's question in a way. So thanks for that. We deal with a lot of youth in our heritage organizations through things like the Bleak House Museums Association, Fogo Island Heritage, et cetera, et cetera. My question was, is there a youth component to this research? And if there is, what does it focus on? If there isn't, would there be plans to do that? And, is there, I guess from the Shorefast side of things, is there kind of an action plan to engage youth, where we have them in the school, moving towards, this is the kind of career you could have in tourism, hospitality, or entrepreneurial thinking, things like that?
Great question. Just a quick note, the Harris Center, Boyne can correct me if I'm wrong. I think this week has a synergy session that will be webcast by Ray Bowman, who used to head up StatsCan Rural Data, precisely on the issue of rural communities and youth. So stay tuned for that one. But for this research in this place, anything to comment on that?
So that wasn't something that we looked at specifically. That said, when we put together this workshop of community leaders from across Newfoundland, what we deliberately went after here was we wanted regional representation, but we also wanted representatives who were older and younger, so different generations, because we think that the future of rural Newfoundland, obviously youth plays a huge part in that, but also the knowledge and experience of older generations as well. And so bringing those two, the intergenerational piece is really, really critical. That's just a personal opinion. This is not based on the research. I don't know if Diane or Blair.
Yeah, and so I'd say, as far as Shorefast role, we have an active program with the high school where we bring students in several times a year to come in and see all the activity that we have in the businesses. They get to come in and see, they choose which department they would like to work with, and that program just continues to grow. So we're trying to get the high school students actively engaged into into everything that we're doing. And so they kind of have an understanding of how these businesses are for the community, how they can see themselves in this, in their career, and come back and have, and have work here and see what we're undertaking. And there has been an open dialogue with the school and engaging them to come out, contribute, share. We've also offered to make presentation at the school. That hasn't come to fruition yet, but there has been an active dialogue there. And just for time constraints and curriculum constraints sometimes as well, they can't always accommodate that. But we are doing, it's an active part of Shorefast's initiatives to try to get people engaged, get a youth element engaged in what we're doing for sure.
Blair, anything you want to add on that?
Yes, a couple of things. While we didn't study youth, particularly in Dr. Sims, the economic geographer who worked with us, the demographic issues and youth and so on is something that that was highlighted in some of that analysis. And so I guess one of the things that if you were looking at future projects or where you might take some of this, it would certainly be to look at that. There are a lot of interesting questions around young people in rural Newfoundland or rural places and how that's going to play out in the future. So it's a significant issue.
And we have we've introduced all of the staff here. There's so much opportunity we are maybe not even aware of. So I would say for all of the Shorefast folks that are here, if you have any ideas of how we can better engage and better connect, we're all ears. We would love to have more of a connection wherever we could.
And we do have people here from the Center for Social Enterprise at MUN and from the Genesis Center at MUN, both of which are doing amazing work with young people and want to do more province-wide. So they should feel free to put their hand up and come to the mic. But in the meantime, anybody else? Lots. Okay, let's get the mic over there.
Hi, my name is Alicia. My wife and I co-own a business in Port Rexton, Newfoundland. My question is directed to kind of Natalie and Blair. You can pipe in as well if you want, Diane. When I went to university, I unfortunately would read abstracts, intros, and conclusions of research papers. But I would like you to give me a brief abstract of what your research is, as well as measurable and maybe non-measurable outcomes you hope that your research will have to society or Newfoundlanders or people around the country, globe, whatever.
In academic terms?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or whatever you feel comfortable in.
Okay, so one of the manuscripts that we have under review right now at a journal is on the place-based tensions of social enterprise and how those tensions can be managed paradoxically. And the idea there is that if you are interested in, if you are a regenerative organization, in other words, you're an organization that exists to make a community that has been depleted, if you're trying to make it stronger, more resilient, then you really need to engage with place-based tensions. And there are a couple of ways in which you can manage those place-based tensions paradoxically. By the way, one of the place-based tensions is this insider-outsider tension. And one of the ways that you can manage that is creating the conditions for meaningful exchange. Another way is to take a really patient approach to enable those the two groups or the place-based tensions to come together and be used productively or be harnessed in a productive way that can enable regeneration. So that's one of the manuscripts that we have under review at the moment.
Lovely academic-y abstract there. Blair, anything else incomprehensible you'd like to say?
It's a great introduction. Thank you. No, I was going to take a slightly higher. You asked about outputs. I think I could speak for the research team, everybody from John, from Jennifer, who's there with her daughter tonight. We want to give something back to Newfoundland. So it's a small output, but if we can suggest or engage with ways of how we might build, continue the existence of rural Newfoundland in whatever. It's not going to stay the same, it will change, but understanding that and trying to spread that to do the things like this workshop is designed to do. Well, I think that's a good output, and particularly if we are, particularly for Natalie and I and the other university paid researchers, paid by the taxpayers of this province. So it's trying to contribute something back that's useful to Newfoundland.
And it's easy to make fun, but in fact, this kind of rigorous work, one of the lines I like is, there's nothing so practical as a good theory. Because all this theory is an explanation of causation, why stuff happens. And there's a lot of people working really hard, spending a lot of money with the best of intentions, doing the wrong things. And so you try to pull apart this stuff and understand it and then put it to use. And that's, for me, the intent of this kind of stuff. I'm not supposed to be answering questions. We have another question up at the front here.
Hi, my name is Deborah Borden. I'm from Twillingate. I'm a tourism operator and community developer there. We talked a lot earlier in the session about how Fogo is unique and how Shorefast is unique. I was wondering, in the research, did you come up with any ideas of how they were similar, or draw any conclusions about other organizations doing similar things, or other communities doing similar things, as we're all here to try to figure out how we can possibly replicate or do things similar or different ourselves?
So Deborah, this sounds like an idea for a next research project. This is where now we go out and look at other communities, other social enterprises across Newfoundland and Labrador, and now we do some comparative case studies rather than a deep dive into one case study. And so thank you for that idea. If anybody's interested in partnering on research, let us know.
One of the other social enterprises that I looked at, and very, very different from Shorefast, was Common Ground, which is a co-working space in St. John's, but a social enterprise. And just looking at those, I are understandably very disparate, very different organizations, but you can see how important the team was. You can see how important the commitment of the people involved. You can see a goal to create something that was not just about themselves or just to rent space in Common Grounds, just to create a luxury inn in Shorefast's case. So there are, commonalities around what a social enterprise is designed to be, but those kinds of things are likely to be present in, I would argue, or I'd argue without a lot of evidence yet, but maybe we need to do more comparison. But those are some of the things, if I look at those two very different organizations, that comes out very strongly, having talked to people involved in both.
I should also mention that one of our research team, John Scouten, is starting a research project looking at fishing for success in Petty Harbor, and Kimberly and Leo are here from Petty Harbor and will be at the workshop tomorrow. So that will be a really interesting example of a social enterprise with maybe different but similar goals, and clearly a very different resource profile as well. So I think there'll be some interesting learnings coming out of that.
Diane, did you want to add on this one, or good?
Yeah, so I'd say one of the things for us is we get a lot of contacts, people contacting us. How do we start? How can I learn about what you're doing? And that's sort of something that we have on our radar of how to get this word out. And that was part of the impetus for us to go into this research partnership. Is it did find an outlet for us where someone came in and looked at what we were doing to help translate some of it out and to be able to share it with other organizations. So I'd say that's definitely, we're at Shorefast, we're looking at how do we take all of what we have learned and share it And so that's an active project for us that we're looking into 2019 and beyond. So the SHIRT project has really kicked that off, and we're hoping to be able to share more as we go forward.
I think we have another question here.
My name is Sheila Fitzgerald, and I am the mayor of the moose capital of the world. That's a really big title by a little tiny town. It's Radington by Arm. It's we're located on the northeast side of the Great Northern Peninsula. So we're only a little tiny town of 999 people. You'll never forget that number, so it's a nice number. And I come here wearing a couple different hats. I'm the mayor. I'm the vice president of municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador. We know that there are 260 small towns of 276 for the province. So they're mostly small towns. And my town, like many other small towns in this province, is struggling greatly from an economic development perspective. So I sit here as a community leader. I have no money. We are struggling to keep the lights on and the potholes filled in. So we talk about social enterprise and kind of a bit of a new language, because being the mayor is a volunteer role for me. I don't get paid to do this. I'm not paid to be here this weekend. I'm coming with an open mind, hoping that I'm going to get one small little piece of something that I can bring back home and tell the rest of my community and surrounding communities, let's try this. And I would expect that my neck of the woods is no different than many other necks of the woods around the province. And as I say, I have no money. So I don't come from a big business sense. My town doesn't have a lot of money. And so when we talk social enterprise, like I say, it's kind of like really challenging my thinking, because I'm not an academic, not in this area, I'm a social worker by trade. But it challenges my thinking about what is social enterprise. And I think what I'm walking towards is a change in attitudes. It's an attitudinal change around working together, so it's a win-win situation, right? But what does that mean for my town? So how do we start? How do we start that conversation? How do we implement social enterprise in a place that's really, really struggling right now? Like, so I hear you guys talking, and it sounds like you're doing great work. University's doing great work coming to Fogo Island. Fogo Island's standing on their own 2 feet right now, and they're doing well. And you're studying how that works. But what about those communities that are struggling to work? Where do we start? So I don't know. That's a really big question. And maybe I'm supposed to learn the answer by the end of the weekend. I don't know. But if you could answer for me now, I'd greatly appreciate it.
I actually think that you may not walk away with a clear answer, but I think by learning from other community leaders who face similar challenges, that you will hopefully it'll spark some ideas, some strategies, some ways to catalyze change, some ways to attract resources. Yeah, so I think that's a really good question. I think it's a question I'm sure that's top of mind for so many of the community leaders who are here. And that's what we have brought you all here together on Fogo Island to have those kinds of conversations. And that'll be tomorrow.
Blair or Diane, for all those people viewing on the internet who won't be here tomorrow, do you have an answer to that question for now?
So my sense is, I don't know your place, but I think so there is a group of you there. You're clearly very passionate about your place. You love your home. You volunteer. You're the mayor. I think part of it is the step one is, and maybe you've done this. I don't know where you guys are at in your transition. What is it you love about that place that brought you here? There's an energy in that, and I'm guessing you're not alone. So the conversation starts from that place in your heart with the other people that are encouraged you to be here. And if you don't have those people in your place, there's other people in the room that share that energy. And that's what we're hoping to bring all of you together. But I think it starts from the core. What brought you here? Because that's specific to you, and that's what's motivating you to be here. From that, we'll spin out with others in your community of what keeps them there. What keeps you in contact with each other? What are you fighting to hold on to? Why is home home? I think if I would start there, because once you find out where that love is coming from, this is where you build economic engines around that. That's where business comes in to support. What do we know? What do we love? What are we willing to fight for? And then you find business resources to support it. Love is transferable. That energy is transferable. You have it. You're sharing it with us. That's your starting point, in my opinion. Blair,
anything further you want to add on this one? No. Okay, We do have another hand up. 2 hands.
Hi, Sonia Mills. Also, own a business in Port. And I'm also actually on the town council as well. And kind of just in this most recent topic, sparked a question. We've in our council, we have a whole fresh council pretty much just recently, and we're starting to try to think. Okay, so I guess back it up. We're talking about taking a business and making it social, but have you ever looked at something like a council and how do you make it think more like a business to achieve similar types of goals? Is that any part of your research, or is that out of the scope of this project? But have you encountered any like exposure to that concept?
Whew.
Yeah, the question, I think, was building on the last question from a municipal mayor
Yeah.
in Port Rexton, where the council is also looking at economic development. Are there examples, as opposed to looking at a business and helping it create more social inputs? Are you able to come up with examples or any insights on how a municipal council can play a role in economic development? Does
Or
that
essentially how it can use perhaps business strategies and tools to still have the same social outcome for your community, but drawing upon those resources or that way of thinking to apply those strategies? And yeah.
It's actually what I did my PhD on, but let's see what these guys have to say first.
Do you want to speak to the research part or the? I mean, so in Fogo Island, so when I talk about whole thinking, so yes, we run a series of businesses that are owned by a charity. We have charitable programs, so we are very much engaged in a broad aspect of the community. And one of the things that we kicked off here, and we think it's probably one of the first in the province, is we actually have an economic development partnership on Fogo Island, which is a partnership between Shorefast, the charity, the town council, and Fogo Island Co-op. So and what we decided to come together was to bring all those different perspectives and look at it from one cultural and economic lens of the island as a whole. Because exactly that, there's sort of a business rigor from that business mindset, but then you have very unique challenges that are coming from the township perspective or from the fishery as a natural resource business as well. So there was very different perspective, all with the goal of bringing economic engines. We have employment, we talked about housing. So the broader broader issues of the island as a whole, we came together in partnership. And absolutely, I think there is value in having that multifaceted perspective and having a conversation coming at things from a different lens. So I don't know who all the makeup is on your council, but if the broader base of experience that you have on your council, that brings a unique perspective. So I would definitely advocate to some of that business-minded ways. That's it's business-minded ways serving social ends, which is my succinct social enterprise definition, which I did do a good job of. So those business-minded ways, absolutely, because that's part of the role of council, is trying to meet that broader mandate. So I think it's finding the right tools and using them in the right application. I think there could be great value and having a broad base of people participating, whether they're actively as counselors or if there's other ways to engage your community. Finding those different perspectives will get you a better answer.
So in our research, what we did is we looked at Shorefast. So we did a really deep dive into Shorefast itself to understand how it works, how its model is unique. And then the second phase of the research was to go out and understand how the community has been impacted culturally and economically by having Shorefast here on Fogo Island. And a big part of that was the economic data analysis that both Blair and Diane have referred to, done by Dr. Alvin Sims at Memorial, who is an economic geographer. What we found was that culturally, there has been a big shift, obviously, from having Shorefast here. And while we don't have answers to your specific question with our data about how it has shifted, say, the mindset of the town council here, because that wasn't what we were looking for. We were looking more at how Shorefast was impacting the business community on Fogo Island. But I would think that if you are able to shift mindsets within your community, that a lot of people wear different hats. So you can have someone on town council who's also a business person. And so once you, when you have people who wear these multiple hats, they bring those different perspectives. So the business perspective might come to town council by having somebody who wears those different hats. And it may come through an economic development partnership like Diane talked about. So I guess there are many different pathways to having a town council become more business minded. And so those are just two examples of how that might happen. But I'm sure tomorrow, hopefully, we'll figure out other pathways for that to happen, because a lot of the community leaders who are in this room and who are participating in the workshop tomorrow are wearing multiple hats and are involved in some way with their municipal council. That's a great question. Thank you.
Blair, anything to add to that?
I was rolling over what your question and also Sheila's question, and again, taking a slightly different perspective perhaps than this is not, and you probably know this, but just to state it, I'm sure you know it, this isn't a silver bullet. We're not offering silver bullets on this. What might be helpful, having said that, is to think about it as a process. So Diane was saying, okay, start with what you love and what you value, and to Sheila, in responding to Sheila's question particularly. So what we may be offering is parts of a process that may fit what will work in your community. But my argument to you would be, okay, we'll give you certain things, process that have worked elsewhere. We'll give you those ideas, but you guys have got to make them your own. You've got to, and so the hard work is in making them your own, arguably. And I don't think any of us are trying to dodge the question, but we're not able to engage with your, at the ground level, what's going on in your communities and what the things, I can't tell you what you love. I could speculate, but you guys know that. You know that. You know what's important in Roddington. You know what's important in Port Rexton. We'll give you some thoughts based on what we've seen with the deep dive we did it with Shorefast and in Fogo Island. But the work is arguably, and that's what we'll start tomorrow, is the work around that. And we're hoping that by having many community, Craig Pollitt and municipalities, Newfoundland and Labrador, played a big role in many of the people who were invited here were based on that organization's suggesting you. So we also will have we hope, a little bit more of an ongoing relationship with municipalities, Newfoundland and Labrador. But tomorrow you'll listen to what other people are thinking, and maybe that will also give you clues for this process, which takes a lot of time and patience. The things that we already talked about, that Shorefast arrived here 12 years ago. How much? 12 years ago, 2005, 2006. Well, we're sitting here now 12 years later. And it's taken a long time to get to this point. Okay.
And it's not over.
And it's not over.
It's just beginning.
And there are case studies written on the town of Pasadena and what it did to develop an incubator mall and an entrepreneurship initiative, what the town of Buckens did in creating the Buckens Development Corporation. Municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador has done a ton of work on this over the last 15, 20 years. They, back when there was more money from government, took a study mission to Iceland, where municipal councils, like in most Nordic countries, which are very like us in some ways, are very active in economic development. So there's a lot of lessons. We don't have to reinvent the wheel on some of that. And yeah, did you want to follow up on something specific there?
Well, I've kind of hugged the mic for one other quick question. I think it's pretty quick, that I was thinking about earlier too. Are there any resources or networks of learning about other social enterprises on the island? Like if we were to say, okay, You mentioned Common Grounds, Shorefast. What other ones are out there that we can engage in and learn from and see different perspectives, whatnot? Is there like a network out there, a place where we could go and find that info, or do we contact you guys, ask who you guys work with, or what's out there for us as if someone in the town of Port Rexton has an idea and they want to start a social enterprise and they want to start reaching out and learn from others? Yeah. What?
So I'm going to suggest we pass the mic to Nicole Hellwig, who is the manager of our Center for Social Enterprise at Memorial University.
Yes, I feel suddenly like I'm the lightning rod for social enterprise right now. So, I mean, a lot of this is very emergent, as much as there has been so much activity on the ground. So some of this is now being captured by some of these case studies, and some of it is actually being captured because we're doing it. So we're actually connected through a number of different ways, actually to many of you here actually in the room. And I think the network that you want to reach out to, you're now part of it. And we're hoping that coming out of tomorrow, I shouldn't say we, but I am hoping that what we come out with tomorrow is a strengthened sense of what that network is and what it could be. So yeah, please join. And you know, it's a lot of this is about the ideas that we all have, the questions that we all have, and finding out, you know, some of these ways that we're all in our different points of light along the coastline and other parts of the province, how we're trying to address some of these things. And I'm not a researcher, I'm more coming from a practitioner's point of view, but just thinking also of your previous question, I think a lot of what we can get is from seeing examples of what is working or also what's not working in other places. So what other municipalities are doing, as Rob was saying, or those things that have been captured before, what's been done, what people are trying. And I was thinking, for example, of some municipalities where they have reached a stage where the town council is so engaged, they're actually spinning out nonprofits from council so that they can preserve some of the community-based assets and say, we want these buildings, for example, or this project to become something that stays alive. We can't do it as council. Who around this table, though, can bring this out in the community and form a nonprofit social enterprise and keep it going.
Thank you, Nicole. Not a lightning rod at all, but a positive life force. We have about 13 minutes or so left. Time for some more questions or comments. Yep, over on the side there.
Hi, Harold Murphy. I'm mayor of the town of Parkers Cove. I guess a thought and a question. Ms. Cobb, in her presentation earlier this evening, showed us a quote from a letter or response to funding requests when they were getting started. And I think the thing that stuck in my mind was that the idea was irrational. Like as, I guess, community groups or volunteers trying to develop social enterprises in the community, they don't have a source of private money, looking for public money. Like how can we best, I guess, work to ensure that we don't get an irrational response to a very rational desire to preserve our communities?
Great question. Who'd like to weigh in on that one?
So we have a great partnership with both the federal and provincial government. And again, I think it leads back to doing and proving. So, you know, years back when this project was first being thought about and that letter came in that this is irrational and, you know, had never been thought of in this way, I think it went ahead and it happened. And they came on as partners, but what I came on after the inn was built. And so I've been in several other rounds of financing for, you know, say the building that we're in here. You have to build up some momentum that you will see through what you're asking for. So I think government wants to see action and they want to see some results and they want to see what was promised brought through. So my instinct says, if you want to take on a project, you have to probably start smaller it can be completely irrational or something out of the box. And I think they are looking for some interesting ways. And I think some of the social enterprises in the room are starting to pave the way for doing things a little bit differently. So their funders are open to it. But I'd say you probably have to start with a smaller scale and build the confidence up. The other thing, in addition to government partner, there is a huge world opening up of social enterprise finance, like private investment money, social finance markets that are looking for investment. And so, that's something that even ourselves, we are starting to get our head around at Shorefast. There's money looking for a place that provides good in the world. And so finding ways to engage with some of this social finance capital that is out there is another strategy forward. But I think step one is you have to start do something, put some momentum behind it, and then you build a track record of confidence. And then definitely the projects for us have been scaling up because we have taken the funds, executed, met with them, had an ongoing dialogue. And when we set forth that we're going to start a project, we complete it. And with that then comes on more partnerships. So it is relationship building as well.
Natalie or Blair? I think it's probably fair to say too, I mean, my knowledge, provincial government does have a social enterprise strategy now, probably largely influenced by the success of Shorefast, which initially seemed kind of wacky. And then, holy cow, they're doing it. So government's always good at following successes. Not necessarily, I used to work there. So I don't think a lot of it would seem as silly now as they might have said 10 years ago. But I wouldn't start there personally. But any other last questions? Yes, over here on the side.
My name's Nadine Emberley. I'm with the Department of Tourism, Culture, Industry, and Innovation, the government person in the room. So I just wanted to comment on that. Some of my colleagues are listening in that couldn't make it here today. We do a nice bit of work with social enterprise, and to Rob's point, we do have the social enterprise action plan that we're implementing currently with some of you in the room. You're going to see some new things coming out in terms of our engagement on a social enterprise network formally to help us, I guess, advance some of the priority pieces in that over the next few years. In terms of financing, we do alternative methods with social enterprise all the time. Our department currently has not-for-profit different funding programs as well as commercial options as well. So most of you would probably be more familiar, not with my face, but with some of our regional offices as well throughout your province. So I guess to that point, there are different types of options out there. I'm not going to give the funding spiel here tonight, but we always look to work with partners right from the start. The quicker that you can start engaging us, generally, it's a joint partnership between us and federal governments, research partners, and different community stakeholders. So if you're doing that and you have your plan, by all means, reach out to us at any point in time.
Thank you very much. See, we've got all the resources right here in the room. Any other last comments, questions, observations? Turn it over to the panel. Maybe start with Blair and then Diane, and then we'll pick on Natalie last. Any final thoughts, comments, Blair, to clue up tonight?
What I've been really pleased with is the number of really good questions, and it's clear that people are thinking very seriously about what and how social enterprise might work in your communities. So it's a great start to the rest of the workshop that we're going to have tomorrow.
Yeah, so again, thank you to everybody that made it out here. I know there was some challenge with weather, and so thank you for everyone's perseverance for coming out. And to those listening and here in the room, I'd say one of the critical elements is staying, it's just an unwavering faith in a path forward. So what I mean by that is you may have an intent of where you're starting. You may not reach that goal, but that there will be a path forward. Stay in conversation, stay committed to the long term, stay committed to the cause. And the course that you will take is probably not maybe exactly what you started with, but there's such great value in being consistent and having that presence, and just have faith in your community and in each other that it will come to a positive. Success is going to come. And if you go with that mindset and you give no other option, there's an energy that comes in that, and you attract people to what you're doing with that. You get a common goal. So an unwavering faith in a path forward. I think that's another critical element for your leadership in a project like this.
Thanks, Diane. Natalie, final word for the panel.
So there's a bit of a negative narrative around rural Newfoundland, that it is depleted. There's a brain drain, that demographic trends are not promising, to say the least. And so my challenge to the community leaders who are in the room and those who are listening is, how can we develop a new narrative for rural Newfoundland that is realistic and aspirational and positive and energizing, that will help us make rural Newfoundland stronger. And I think that we have the right people in the room, and we'll have the right people tomorrow to answer that question.
Super. So we'll all be looking forward to the results of the project, both the academic publications, but also lots more of accessible stuff. I think we've had a really rich conversation here tonight with loads of good lessons and back and forth. The webcast will be digitally recorded and will be on the Harris Center website in about a week. So by all means, go back and put it to use. In addition, the audio and some additional content will be produced under Rural Roots. Boyan First is here, the maestro who produces Rural Roots. And that's the only podcast in Canada now, I think, focused on rural activities and development and research. I always oversell everything. And so you find it on Rural Roots Podcast, and it's US, as in Rural Roots mailbox number in rural Canada. So ruralrootspodcast.com. So look for more there soon, in about 2 weeks. And thanks a million to our team, as always, with the Harris Center. John Duff in particular, behind the scenes, enables Boyan to look technically proficient here tonight. So, and thanks for Boyan being here, and he'll be co-facilitating tomorrow. Natalie and her whole research team, including the Shorefast partners. And in particular, please join me in thanking Natalie, Blair, and Diane for a fantastic job on the panel tonight. And most of all, thanks a million to the people of Fogo Island and all the people who have contributed tonight, and to all of you in the room and viewing online. We're all at it because we care about this province and our community. And let's keep working together, and we will have many positive narratives. Thanks a million, and good night.